You know, you better hide some of this stuff. These guys like to take it back and use it for their race team.
Dick, tell her food is what we're after.
Food is what he's after.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, real nice.
Because I asked him the same thing. I said,
First time I've ever been in one.
Well, me too. They have one in Myrtle Beach.
And I made a pact with myself that I was going to get me a job when I got to be 85.
85.
85.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that.
You're working on that.
I'm working on that.
Send out for extra makeup for me and Steve.
Yeah.
They got,
A lot.
They got some color back. I swear that would be Leonard.
I think so too. What's with the rouge?
You look so pretty.
What are you going to do about Beaty there on top?
By God, she can't do much about me now.
Yeah, put the embalming fluid on me.
That's right.
Junie, you look beautiful.
I've heard it. But you're not proposing, though.
No, I'm not proposing at all.
Get you out of nursing home or what?
What are you doing, Don? I figured I said, well, I knew Bobby would be the last one here.
They get you out of nursing home or what?
I told everybody an hour ago, I said, the last person walking that door is going to be Bobby Allison.
Well,
I said, when he dies, they're going to have to hold the funeral up 30 minutes for him to get there. So he's going to be late.
The guy out there thought I was somebody, got my autograph.
The only way you can tell Red's lying is his lips are moving.
Now, Strokey, don't start that stuff. We got to tell some stories on TV in here now.
Oh, yeah.
Some we can tell, some we can't.
Are y'all taping? Am I at the right place? Am I right place?
And every race driver I've ever met is a pretty good storyteller. They learned that in self-defense.
Think I look okay? Yeah, I think I look pretty good. I think my wife would be proud. Yeah. My children, mom and dad, Michael, my brother. I think everybody, I think I look real. I think compared to the other guys. Here we go now.
Welcome to that Fast Car Cafe in Nashville, Tennessee. What would happen if you put together the guys that built the cars with the guys that drove the cars, with the inspector that tore down the cars, with the writers that wrote about it, and the announcers that announced it? You're about to go behind the scenes and hear the stories directly from the legends that lived them. These are the guys that made racing what it is today. Let's walk through the tunnel and join 24 stock car racing legends.
Hey, I heard y'all had a driver here.
By the time you got here,
It's a long way from
Bondi Long had been in the drag racing business, and Leland Colvin talked him into buying a NASCAR Winston Cup car. And so they bought a Plymouth from Petty Enterprises, and Bobby Isaac was going to be the driver. So Bobby and I were friends and grew up in the same area, and so we were racing at Richmond, Virginia, and that was back in the days when you just go there and practice and qualify and race the same day. And Bobby and I had left early that morning going to Richmond and driven up there, and he was expecting his race car to be there. Well, we got there, and the race car never got there. And so he went down the next day to find out what had happened, and what had happened, they were towing it with some kind of a tow rig that it was not on a trailer, and pulling it behind a carry-all type of a Chevrolet Suburban type of a vehicle. And John Henry Reynolds was driving the thing, and we're going up 301 out of Dillon, South Carolina, and the thing, they hit some water in the road. It had rained pretty heavy, and the water standing in the road, and the thing hydroplaned. He lost control, and he spun out down through the field. And so they called a wrecker. It was about 20 miles out of town, and the wrecker came out and pulled him out, charged him $25. And when they got it pulled out, it was headed back south. So Bondi told John Henry, said, "You can't drive this thing." He said, "Let me drive it." So they went back down the road there a mile or two where it gives space big enough to turn that thing around and head back north. got back up there, and Barney did exactly the same thing. He hit that same water, that thing hydroplaned, and he spun it down through the field again. Well, the wrecker hadn't even had time to get back to town, so they had to wait till it got back to town. Got him back up there, paid $25 more to pull it out, and the thing was still headed south when they got it out. And so they went down there where they found that place big enough to turn it around was a service station or a country store, really. And by that time, it had gotten daylight, and the man who ran the store was standing out there in the doorway there, saw this race car pull in there, and Barney pulled it in, unhooked it over there on the side of the lot. And he came up there and said, "Mister," said, "do you own this store?" He said, "Yes, I do." He didn't ask him if he could leave that car there. He says, I'm going to leave that race car there. Said, "If you can sell that thing," he said, "you sell it." And said, "If you can't sell it," he said, "you give it to somebody. I'm heading to the beach."
I was going to Salem, Indiana. I had a Winter National truck that I towed my Cup car with, and David If was working for me. So David wanted to take his wife and kids to the race. And I said, "David, a truck, that old truck's uncomfortable anyway, just seat about that long, old International." I said, "But if you want, wife and 3 kids, if you want to throw them all up in there and drive to Salem, Indiana, we'll have at it." So he does. Him and his wife Gretchen and the boys are all in there, and they got blankets all in the floor and everything. And an old truck like that, you got a handbrake that you used to pull, and it had a kind of a bell in there that it would lock down against. And so we're going down the road, and I noticed my truck started smoking. And so I run up beside of David, and I signaled to him. I said, "Pull over." I said, "There's something wrong with the truck." So he pulled off the side of the road, and he gets out, and we get up on the hood, and David said, "I don't know, it smells like rags burning." And about that time, Gretchen and the kids just slammed open the door and jumped out of the truck, and they had that blanket down in the floorboard, and that handbrake, one of the kids had pulled it back just enough, it was rubbing, and it caught the blanket on fire. And the kids were laying on the blanket, and the blanket caught on fire, and there they were, just had to jump out of the truck, keep them burning up.
Always something.
Eli, I got one more story on Barney on towing, then I'll shut up.
No.
That same year, in April, they were going to Martinsville to the race, and Bondi was the team manager. Now, Bondi's still a good friend, and hope he don't mind me telling the story, but he would go by the accountant's office and pick up expense money. So he went by on Thursday or Friday, whenever, and picked up his expense check for $150, went by and got it cashed, and he was towing the race car to Martinsville. And he went through some little town, pulled up to a stoplight, and there was a pawn shop over there on the corner, and he looked over there, and there was a beautiful guitar in the window of the pawn shop. And Bondi liked guitars. He could play them. And so he pulled over and went in there, and he said, "How much is that guitar?" And the man said, $150. Well, he had $150 because he got that check cashed, And so he bought that guitar, got on to Martinsville, practiced and qualified that afternoon, and took the crew out to dinner that night. And when it came time to pay the bill, Bobby Isaac said, "Long, you got the money, right?" "Oh, yeah, I got it." And he reached in his pocket to pay the bill, and that's the next time he remembered that he had spent that $150, didn't have any money to pay him, and none of them had any money. And Isaac said, and he told the story of why he didn't have the money, and Bobby looked at him, he was real dry-witted, as David knows, and he said, "Bought a guitar." Said, "Did you ever hear tell of Ernest Tubb taking a race car to the Grand Ole Opry?" He said, "What are you doing bringing a guitar to the racetrack?"
The philosopher.
Let me tell you one Bondi story.
Sure.
Ned, I don't know whether you explained, Bondi was an heir to DuPont. Right. He was in the DuPont family, so his checks came regular, but he never had any money on him. Never cared. If he had $300 he left home before he got 100 yards away, it was gone. He spent every bit of it, never had any money with him at all. So one Sunday, I was at home. Racing was, in fact, this was a long time after Bondi had been out of the racing business. But my telephone rang, and it was Bondi Long. And he says, "Cale," says, "I'm in some trouble." I said, "What is it, Bondi?" He said, "Well, I was coming through Timmonsville, and I got stopped for speeding." I said, "Yeah?" And he said, "And I don't have any money on me." Well, I knew that, So I said, "Well, let me speak to the patrolman there." So he put the Timmonsville town cop on. I said, "Let him go, and I'll come by tomorrow and pay his fine." It was $20. And so he let him go, and next Monday morning I went by and paid his fine. Well, I reckon 6, 8 months, maybe a year later. I don't know. But I drove up to the house one day, and there was a big old sack sitting on my back porch steps. And I went and opened it up, and there was a note from Barney. $20 that he'd paid me back for paying his fine in pennies. I had a sack full of, had a $20 worth of pennies sitting in a sack on my back door. So I guess Barney had to save his pennies like everybody else did.
What's the best speeding ticket story we have in this group that never, of course, had a speeding ticket? Huh?
Yeah, I can tell you the guy that got them every time and why he got an airplane.
Relation?
Surely he's not talking about you, Bobby.
Yeah, he's a relation.
He's a relation.
I believe he's going to be. I believe he's going to.
It didn't make any difference what we were doing, whether the policeman was a friendly policeman or unfriendly policeman. When this guy got stopped, he was definitely getting a ticket. He wasn't talking his way out of them. He wasn't being nice. Well, he wasn't being humble.
He's never nice.
But he got a ticket. We were going to Miami one time, Bobby and I, in a pickup truck. We raced in Alabama all summer, and we would go back to Miami in the winter. We're going down US 27, which is a very long, straight stretch of road there between South Bay and Andytown. And I looked over in the side mirror, and I see this light flashing. And I turned over to Bobby and I said, Bobby, I think there's a policeman behind us way back there, but I think he's wanting us to stop. Bobby said, no, he don't want us to stop. If he wants to stop, he'd catch up with us. Well, we went about another 10 miles down the road, and he finally did get caught up enough to get us pulled over. And the policeman said to Bobby, he says, when you saw my light, how come you didn't slow down? My car was running hot. Bobby said, well, then you should have stopped. And we got a nice ticket then. We got tickets every time. It didn't make any difference. He talked us into a ticket.
I was just trying to be nice to him.
I know you were,
he should have
Bobby.
stopped.
And you know what he says to me?
Hot.
He says, why do you think I bought an airplane?
Figures.
Coming from 1976, Talladega. I won the race, the fall race, and a friend of mine, Bob Prott from up in Wisconsin, was with me, and he had to get back to Atlanta to catch a plane. Well, Interstate 20 wasn't all done. There was a big stretch of it was done, but it wasn't open yet. And I had my 69 Camaro Z28, and we were really sailing along. I mean, I really don't know. We was running in excess probably of 120, 125 mile an hour, and of course there wasn't any traffic out there. And we met a patrol car. He was on the other side. So, we kept going, and he turned around, and when we're Interstate 20 in it, and he had to go up a ramp, there was a bunch of traffic there. So we had to sit in that line of traffic. Well, here he come. So he turns the light on and pulls us over, and he said, what's your hurry? And I said, well, I got a fellow with me here. He's got to catch a plane in Atlanta. And he said, well, I don't think you're going to get him there on time. He said, how fast were you going back there? I said, well, I don't know. I said, probably 80, 85. He said, I believe you were going a little faster than that. And I said, well, I really wasn't looking at it. Let's see your driver's license. So I handed him my driver's license, and he looks at him, looks at me, he looks back at the license, and he said, you drive a race car? I said, yeah. He said, you just won the race. I said, yes, sir. He said, here's your driver's license. He said, you can handle it. He said, you got any postcards? I said, yes, sir. He said, sign me a couple. I signed him a couple postcards. He said, I'll call a patrolman ahead in the next town and tell him to not monkey with you. He said, just be careful and get this guy to the airport.
I had one just the opposite of that. Sometimes you get them right and wrong. This guy did the same thing to me. He stopped me. And I was the same way. I was humping down the road. And the guy stopped me, talked to me for a minute, got my driver's license, and he says, you're the guy that drives it, you're the one that drives the race cars, right? And I just got a warm feel. I thought, yeah, man, I'm out of this deal. And he says, you guys should know better than this. You know what speed does, and you should know better than this on the highway, and wrote me a damn ticket. So sometimes it don't work that way.
We got to hear Pearson's story. You and Hunter going to the race.
You tell it.
Oh, no, you got to tell that one.
We was down in Savannah, Georgia. We was running a race there, and we was going to North Wilkesboro, I believe it was. And we was running a little bit late. I kept telling Hunter he had to go, you know, that we was running a little bit late. So we come over one of the hills down there in Georgia, and cop was sitting there, and he come called us and pulled us over. And Jim was just nervous as he could be, you know, when he's getting his license out. So when the patrolman walked up there, you know, and asked him if he was in a hurry, and I said, man, I'm sure glad you stopped him. I've been trying to get him to slow down ever since we left Savannah. Jim looked at me, and then he didn't have no money. You know, he wasn't going to charge me but $10. And he wanted to borrow $10. I said, take him to jail because he won't pay me back. But anyway, the patrolman finally looked and recognized us and all, and let him go. But had him worried a little bit.
There was a story about you when you broke down at Martinsville and they had a caution. You got across the road and you were going home, past a couple of cars on a white line, and they stopped you. Remember that story?
Yeah, I was in there.
Huh?
I was in that one.
You were?
Yep.
I don't remember that.
Well, and the police, am I right about this?
Yeah, let Brooks tell it.
Yeah, David didn't run good at all. That was toward the end of his time, I guess. Anyway, he didn't run good at all that day.
What do you mean end of a time?
I was getting it toward the end of the time.
I better tell it.
But anyway, they go back to the airport, and he was passing some guys, and he was over on the left-hand lane on the double line, and a guy pulled him over, and asked him how come he going so fast. And he said, well, I was just trying to get on out of here. He said, I was just, you know, going so we could get out of here. And he said, well, what was you passing on that lane for? And he said, well, I was just trying to get on to the airport. He said, David, I've been watching you at the racetrack today. You ain't passed anybody all day. Why are you starting that?
Let me tell you a racing story on him at Martinsville. I fell out of the race, and I'm over there getting my clothes changed and everything else, and somebody come running up and says, Leonard Wood wants to talk to you. David needs some relief. So I got my uniform all back on, my helmet and everything. I run over there, and Leonard says, David's not feeling good, and he wanted to know if you'd relief for him. Yeah. So I'm standing there, and Leonard said, now David said he got, the brakes aren't good, and I said, Leonard, there ain't nothing. I've been driving out brakes all day since I've been here. I said, yeah, it's no problem. So I get in this car, and I go out there, and the brake pedal's all the way up to the top, and I mean everything, and I take off. I finished third, did I not, Leonard? And the next caution come out. You know, I run a while, and the caution come out, and who's running across the racetrack going out the gate? And he's waving at me like this right here. I mean, I'm driving the car. Is that true or what, Leonard Wood?
You got me. You talk about some of the race drivers' stuff was superstitious and such, and I don't think they're near as bad as they used to be. But David is he's a little queer when it comes to superstitions. I mean, he's got some good ones. But we were at Martinsville, we were at Bristol one time, and this is kind of long toward the end of David's deal again, you know. And,
I'm not superstitious. I just don't pay attention.
So anyway, long about maybe the same year there or something like that. But anyway, he used to always drive with them penny loafers on, like similar to what he's got now. But he always had penny loafers on. Drove that away for years. And so he had told me, he said, this was in the early 70s, I guess, or somewhere along in there. Well, no, it was later than that. But anyway, he had told me, he said, I really don't feel like doing this thing today. He said, you know, if you fall out, he said, come over and see if you can help me out some. You know, I'd like to, I'm not feeling good or something like that. Anyway, I said, okay. So I thought, man, that'd be great getting, I think it was Woods' car, who his car was in, I don't know. Maybe it was Holman's car, I don't know. But anyway, boy, I'd like to do that. So I get out pretty early, and we were busting beads in. Everybody sitting in here can remember when we was busting the beads on the right front tires in those days when the brakes, you know. Yeah. And you would just hear what you heard when you busted the tire was boom, boom. Well, the first one was a tire and the second one was a wall. And you didn't even have time to close your eyes. I mean, you just, you know, you hit the wall so fast you see the hood fly up before you have a chance to close your eyes. So I'm standing around over, and I get just about halfway over to where David and them was pitting. And sure enough, there was a boom, boom, and it was him. He busted the tire, come off fourth turn. And he slid down and hit the inside wall and bounced off the inside wall. Well, it kind of rang his bell a little bit. Now, this is Hutch telling the story, and I think this is probably true. Dick Hutchins we're talking about. So David kind of gets all of his stuff together, and you've always heard, a train hit the car and it knocked all their shoes off, and everybody got, or you hit a truck, hit them so hard that it knocked their shoes off and all that stuff. Well, David evidently, when he kindly started coming to, he looked down and his shoes was in the floorboard like this, and right under the brake and clutch pedal.
barefooted.
Off his feet. I mean, the shoes were just sitting there right under the clutch pedal, brake pedal. So Hutch jumps the wall and starts honking, and David hollers at him and says, "Hutch!" And Hutch says, "Yeah, what do you want, Pearson?" He said, "Oh, thank God I'm not dead." He said, "I'm not dead." He looked at it and seen his shoes, and he knew that everybody always got their shoes knocked off when they got killed. And so he thought he was dead.
During the wreck, I've always heard when knocked your shoes off, a lot of them got killed.
If you could holler at him, why would you think he's dead? And he says, "'Cause you don't know."
I didn't know where he did.
While we're talking, I want to thank Pearson. As a very young boy, he was my hero. When I was
Lord have mercy, he was driving. he was running.
I used to slip under the fence.
Car when I was working in the service station.
No, I used to slip under the fence to watch David Pearson drive. What a driver he was! And I grew up in the shadow of David Pearson. Believe me.
I was pumping gas when he was out racing. That's the truth.
While we're on Pearson, we was down in Atlanta running, and it was a track that in a time that new tires really helped. And Janet Guthrie was a very good race driver. And she'd come in and put on a set of new tires. Well, she was running David down. I mean, closing fast. He says, "I got to have some tires. Come right down the road."
He told me once she never outran him.
No, I'd stop.
Tell you one more story about speeding tickets. Several years ago, the late Tim Richmond and Harry Hyde, I hitched a ride with them back to the motel when we was in Pocono. And for that particular day, most of you know Harry Hyde, remember Harry. Harry could get pretty hot-tempered about things, and for some reason, he and Richmond had been pretty crossways that day about the race car or whatever. And it was obvious they were mad, and I was riding back to the motel with them, and Richmond was driving. And he was kicking along pretty good, and the cop fell in behind him, pulled us over. And he was running probably about 80 miles an hour. And he told Richmond, he said, "Son, you're running over 80 miles an hour." And Richmond argued with him. He said, "No, I wasn't." He said, "I was running 55. He said, "Wasn't I, Harry?" Harry said, "Whatever you say, boy." I said, "I never argue with you when you're drinking."
Harry Hyde.
Harry Hyde story.
Who has the best
I know
Harry Hyde
one on
story?
Harry. One time he and Bobby Isaac, we was up in Martinsville, Virginia. He come in and he said, "Harry, it's not taking the gas exactly right. Something wrong with the carburetor." He said, "It's not really blooping." He'd always say blooping. He said, "It's not really blooping when I get in the throttle, but it's just fixing to." So Harry kept looking at him. He was trying to explain to him. He thought a minute. He said, "Bobby, tell you one thing." He said, "If you're smart enough to tell me that carburetor is fixing a bloop before it bloops, I'm smart enough to fix it before it does." So that was a good one on that one. Yeah.
Dave, tell him about how Harry did his surveillance work.
He'd go in the bathroom and sit there up on the toilet, pull his feet up and just sit there like a half an hour, and nobody know he was in there, and he'd listen to what everybody was talking about. And what was going on.
Yeah, I heard him say one time you could find out anything you want to know if you still go sit in the bathroom.
And Dave can vouch for this because he drove a car. His favorite thing to tell the driver, "You can't throw this thing out of the racetrack."
Exactly. That's exactly.
You cannot throw this thing out of the racetrack. Well, I was fortunate enough to drive first short wheelbase car for him, and we were at Talladega, and I was running fairly decent, but I was having a pretty good chore. And he said, "Donnie," he said, "you can't throw that thing out of this racetrack." I said, "Harry, I'm aware of that. It's too damn heavy for me to throw it out of here, but I can drive it out of here." He said, no, that won't happen." I said, "Harry, hop in there and show me one time. You've been telling me all the time. Hop in there and show me." He said, "Oh, no, I can't get in there." He said, "That's your job."
Tom Higgins, have you got a Harry Hyde story?
Yeah, one time when Richmond was driving for Harry with Hendrick Motorsport, Harry had a home near Charlotte Motor Speedway, and he and his nephew Jimmy were out target shooting, plinking, shooting at tin cans with .22 rifle, and Richmond and his girlfriend dropped by to say hello to Harry and saw him shooting, target shooting at the tin cans. Richmond said, that looks like fun. I'd really like to try that. I said, how about letting my girlfriend and I take a few shots? Harry said, well, I'll have to go to the house and get some more shells. So he's gone. Finally came back, and he gave the girl young lady a box of 22 shells, gave Tim a box. And the young girl hit everything, hit every can she shot at. Tim hit none whatsoever. And knowing Tim, he was a perfectionist type of guy and was proud of being able to do everything pretty well. He hit no cans whatsoever, threw the gun down, left. Well, he didn't know Harry had gone up there and got a box of blanks and gave them to Tim.
Buddy? I got one last story about Harry Hyde. I raced for him, I won with him, and I will tell you that he was 10 years ahead of his time most of the time as far as his race cars. But one thing you didn't want to do was tell Harry Hyde what the car was doing and make him want to believe it. So I told him, I said, Harry, we're flying. We're going to win the pole. I need more spoiler. It's loose. He said, I'll fix it. Now, I knew he's mad at me right then, so he went back there, and I heard him rattling around back there. And he said, all right, go out there now. I guarantee you it won't be loose now. So I went down the back straightaway, and going into turn 3, I went, whoa, I'm 300 RPM more than I've ever been in my life. And I went into turn 3, and it was like somebody shot the right rear tire out. I went like that, whipped back like that, stood in the throttle, got back a little bit straight, and about a half a mile on the other side of the racetrack, it got down to those little wobbles where you're doing like that. And I come in and went, and he come up to me and said, now that's loose.
Yeah, but he took the spoiler
He took the spoiler off the car. He had taken it all the way off. I mean, and yeah, he fixed me up. I told him from then on, just put a piece of tape back there where it looked like something's on it.
We were here at Nashville one night, and Harry wasn't drinking, neither am I. And so we got talking about it, and Brooks was driving for me. We didn't have enough to really win the race, and he wasn't too proud of what Buddy was doing for him. So he said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. He said, if either one of those drivers win the race tonight, we're going to get drunk together. Well, then neither one of us think we had a chance. So we made that pact, and Buddy won the race. So to make everybody think that we had drank, when we went to Dover, we went in the bar and made it like we were drinking and staggering around. But old Harry he was a good guy to be with, and he was a lot of fun. And you really miss a guy like that because they didn't make but one of Harry Hyde.
The character.
I tell you, let me tell you what on Harry was too. We were Pocono and he was running fuel. Jeff Bodine was driving the car. He had that 5-car Hendrix. And the car come in, you could smell the damn stuff.
Well, you could see it. It was blue.
Anyhow, I stopped him and I said, I want a gas sample. He said, why? I said, I smell fuel. Hell, you can't smell. Your damn nose has been cut off. Let me tell you just one more. We were at Charlotte one time, and Harry Lee, his boy, Harry bought him a damn set of steel-toed shoes, like construction workers use. So they pushed the car up on the scales, put the right front wheel up on the toes. Now, he had been watching the guy that was doing the height and checking on. He's staying over on the left side of the car. But I just happened to walk by, and I stand there, and I saw that car sitting up about 1.5 inches. And I told everybody, I said, get away from the cars now. Get away, get away. Harry, he backed up as far as he could. I said, Harry, come on, get away from the car. He said, get on the other side. He said, Daddy, take the car off my toes.
Eli, you know what this leads to, don't you?
Cheating.
Yeah.
It leads to cheating.
Yeah, exactly.
We have not talked about creative engineering yet.
I got one I need to tell. It's at Talladega, of course, when I was driving for Harry. And there was always a rivalry between Pearson, the Woods brothers, and Harry Hyde, and when we went down there for the pole. And is what made matters worse. I had a carburetor, it was a good carburetor, and I used to sometimes qualify with it on my car, and then I'd loan it to to the Woods Brothers, and they would use it. It was really a good carburetor.
Did you get one of Junior's?
Yeah, it's been
No, I didn't get this one from Junior.
This is where we came in.
But anyhow, they were a little bit quicker than we were, but not much. And so I told Harry, I said, Harry, we're not going to win the pole unless you take the spoiler off. And he says, I'm telling you, Dave Marcus, you cannot drive that race car with the spoiler off. I said, I believe I can make it. He says, you can't get through the trial. Well, I said, I can. So it was about lunchtime there, time to break for lunch, and he said, go get you some lunch. So they shut the racetrack down. I come back from lunch, and he said, I took the spoiler off the car. I said, good. I said, I believe we can win the pole. He said, you know why I did it? I said, no. He said, Columbus didn't know where he was going to land when he took off either. We went out there and we did win the pole.
Dick, who is the most creative crew chief, most inventive, or shall I say it, the biggest darn cheater of the lot?
Heads turned towards you.
God, look at him. Look at him. That warehouse that I had for NASCAR store and equipment, there was not a single race car that I did not have, or we did not have something off of.
Not one of ours, I guarantee you.
Certainly
Pearson
not.
and I never drove a car that was fixed
I mean, we've
up.
seen, what,
you
lead
got-
weight
you got
radios, we've
Yeah.
seen 50-pound helmets, we've seen all sorts of stuff.
Darrell, he had a good. Darrell had a radio.
Yeah, BBs.
You asked
Dale
about all
had,
those.
Darrell, not Dale, Darrell had a radio that weighed 28 pounds.
It weighed 50 pounds, did it?
No, it didn't. No, it didn't, because I weighed
It
it.
was one of the most solid
radio
state.
too, wasn't
It was a solid state.
Anyway, that much got to be able to pick up everything.
What about...
Anyhow, I told Jeff Hammond, I said, all right, I'm going to give you a choice. It was a World 600. I said, you wear that radio the whole race, and I'm going to sign the man to you, see what you wear it, or a $500 fine. He paid the $500.
We were standing in a crowd. It was me and Earnhardt and, I don't know, Wallace and 2 or 3 others. And here comes Dick. And he's got this radio up here like this. And it looks like a radio. I mean, even I didn't know it wasn't a radio.
Identical.
And he's standing there, and he walks up in amongst us. And he just stands there holding that. Like I said, Dick, something wrong with your radio? And he threw that thing down on the ground. If it hit one of our foot, it'd have broke it. He said, it ain't my radio. He said, I took it out of your race car.
No, that's not what I said. It's not my damn radio, it's yours.
And we had to run against people like that.
Oh, yeah, well, I learned everything I know from you guys. Y'all were a lot worse than I ever thought about being.
How much stuff do you think he got away with, Junior? Percentage-wise, how much did they catch, and how much was
caught
never
it
caught?
all.
You don't know?
They caught it all. I never did get away with nothing.
Now this party was really going good.
I don't want nobody to have no second
What
thought.
about those wheels that it took 2 men and a boy to lift up on the wall?
North Wilkesboro.
They never caught those?
That was a high wall.
That wasn't my wheel. I'm blowing the knee Barney.
You getting us all down now, Junie?
I'm listening to it. They
I'll
got
tell
to
you,
come up with some...
Junior has the best saying. Don't matter what you catch, it ain't mine. Somebody did it.
Who was that stopping your pits, Junior, and you fueled him? You wasn't supposed to fuel anybody else. They wasn't supposed to stop in your pit. Somebody
dude right
stopped in
here?
your pit.
That was me.
And you filled him up, and the inspector was getting on to him. He said, wasn't that our car?
Y'all beat me and beat our car in the race.
Yeah, that was.
hey.
We was at Daytona. That was before before we had radios, you know, and we had the pit signs in, and I was leading the race. I was driving for the Wood Brothers, and Leroy was driving for Junior, and during the race, I was going down the back stretch, about time for a pit stop. I ran out of gas going down the back stretch. Well, they didn't know that I was out of gas because I had no way to tell them. So when I came in, they wasn't looking for me, so I missed my pit. They wasn't standing out with the pit board out, so I missed the pit, dead in the water. I said, well, my day's over now. I've already gone by my pit, and I can't stop, can't get started, going around the racetrack to get back in. Well, anyway, I looked up, and there was Junior standing out with a can of gas in his hand in his pits. So I just rolled up to Junior and stopped. He dumped enough gas in there, and got me going and got it cranked up and got going. And the official ran up to him and said, "Junior, you can't do that. You can't put gas in somebody else's car." Junior jumped back and said, "Well, that wasn't my car." But anyway, as it turned out, I went on and won the race, and Junior and Leroy finished second. So he cost himself a victory that day, but did a good deed.
Let me tell you something I did one time on the engine. Neil Bonnet was driving for Bob Ray Hilly and Buck Mott, and we were at North Wilkesboro. Neil won the race. Took the engine apart, and it was a little bit over. So I told Butch, I said, take the engine out and put it in the truck, and I'll meet you at Hutch's in the morning. We'll measure it again. Okay, that's the first thing to do. We did that, went over next morning, measured that engine, it come up to 357, 990 or something like that, real close. So Butch was going to put the engine back together and send it to Miami. Bob Ray Hilly was still in Miami. I said, no, wait a minute, I want to write him a note. So I got a scratch pad and wrote him a real fancy note and nice words and all. Put it to Bob, get you next time. Yeah. And we put it into, had the intake off, put it down in the engine. He put the engine back together, said, no, I said, don't say nothing to him now. Let him take it apart and find a note inside the engine. Sent the engine to Miami, they took the engine apart, and Bob Ray Hilly almost had a heart attack. He called me and told me, don't ever do that again.
I think one of the most innovative things, if I'm not mistaken, I came here in '69. I think that's the year it happened with Leroy, I believe. But Junior had, that's when drafting was really getting tight. I mean, everybody was learning drafting in the late 60s, early 70s. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the year everybody had pipes coming out the sides. Well, you needed to do it, whatever. But he showed up in Daytona with his pipes and everything out the side, and then race day morning, then you put the pipes right out the tailpipe. And everybody would run right against each other. The bumpers right up against each other. And there he had 2 3-inch pipes, exhaust pipes, 1,200 degrees, sticking right in your radiator. And he won the race that time, didn't he?
Put everybody else out.
It wasn't illegal, but it became illegal immediately.
Buddy Baker was the one falling.
I went, man, I'm hot. I looked down there and I went, what's going on? I'd pull out like that and the water temperature would go back like that. And I'd pull back in behind him, it'd go. So I showed up the next week in Atlanta and Junior had them outlawed.
Couldn't do it anymore.
How about on your side of the ledger there? You just sitting taking this all in?
I'm just listening, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm hearing some
You made a comment way early in the show about knockout things and the restrictor plates and all. How did you know how to do all that?
And nitrous.
I obviously learned that from somebody. One of my previous car owners or something like that. I'm not sure exactly which one. But, I did have to do a lot of my own machine work and stuff along the way. And so I was able to come up with a little something every now and then. And for Marty Robbins, it was okay, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, after all.
Absolutely.
Robbie was driving for Mario Rossi for a while, and Rossi, for the people that still remember him, he's been gone a long time, but the people that remember him, if he ever went to the racetrack without something cheating, he just never did. I mean, he always had something. And there was a fellow named B.B. Alvarez. I think that Ned knows him some, whatever. But he was the same way. He had to cheat. He just had to make something wrong or whatever. So they decided, when Bob was driving the car for him, and they decided that they were going to dump 22 gallons of gas faster than anybody else. You couldn't do it in the cans, free-flowing cans, as fast as they could change the tires, and they were going to get that gas in. So he worked for weeks building a vacuum pump inside the fuel tank and spent a lot of money doing it. I mean, a ton of money. And Bobby will verify all this. They had a race shop there in Spartanburg that was right against a sidewalk on a 4-lane highway, but the door was right at the sidewalk. And so you had the sidewalk, you had a little grassy area, and then you had 2 lanes of traffic, and then 2 lanes on the other side. Well, I was over there the night that they decided they was going to try it, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they was going to try this. So they got it all set up, exactly like they was going to do a pit stop, and you had the 1-inch overflow tube coming out the back. So they're going to get it all tried up. And they dumped in the first can, and just, you couldn't even hardly pull it away from it, just sucking it so hard. And that was for the quick connector brakes too, you know, that's when you just stuck it over tube. So they dumped in a second can, and just about the time that one was empty, it filled up and shot 1 inch of fuel all the way to the center of the road out there. All the way to the center of the road. And I remember Rossi turned to Alvarez and he says, Alvarez, Gasaway ain't gonna buy that. We're gonna have to fix it. We don't have time to do it. Take it out. They took it out.
Let's talk a couple minutes before the time gets away from us about some fantastic finishes. You know, we've talked about the Cale and Donnie and Bobby deal, but obviously your call of this man and Richard Petty at Daytona is one of the most famous in all of motorsports. Let's talk about that finish, and we'll all kind of, guys, jump in on some other fantastic finishes. Recount that day for us, David.
The day that Richard run all over me.
But not here to defend it.
You should have been here to defend it.
Well, he ought to been here.
That's the way I saw it too.
He asked the question, didn't he, David?
That's right.
That's exactly how it happened.
But no, that day that Richard was quite a bit faster than I was, and I had all day long. I was trying different things to get him to pass me one way or another and see how I could do drafting and stuff. And 2 or 3 times before that, I had beat him, and he says he was going to wait till the last lap to do it, you know, somewhere or another. But only way I know to do is try some way or another to get him in front of me. But I did. I finally slowed up enough that he passed me. And going down the backstretch, I drafted by him, you know. And of course, like I said, that day, I think he had about 50 more horsepower than I did. It had to be a big engine, as fast as he was running, you know. But I went into 3, and he just ducked down and come right back under me, you know. And so come off of 4, he wasn't quite by me, and I guess he thought he was, and he moved up in front of me. I always accused him to block me, but he wasn't quite by me, and of course he hit my left front fender, and both of us spun around and wrecked, you know.
Classic finish.
Everybody is standing here at the Daytona International Speedway. Look at David Pearson. He has moved closer. Can he do it? He's going to pull out now. He's going to try for the... I don't know. He's down on the inside. He's got the lead, but there's a car ahead of him. There's a slower car ahead of him. And Richard Petty and Pearson go high. Pearson now has the lead. Petty tries to go back down on the inside as they come out of the 4th turn. They only have about 750 yards to go. Oh! They go straightaway. They did hit. Petty smashes into the wall. Will he come across the start-finish line? He's going to win the race. He's going to win it spinning, as he, I believe, will take the checkered flag. No, he did not make it. He is less than 100 yards from it. Here comes Pearson. Pearson is going to try to make it across the finish line. Petty has his car going. Pearson's going to win it. Oh, nice angle. He wins the race. What the finish scoreboard? I've never seen anything like that. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable, because here is Richard Petty, not more than maybe 150.
Did that engine of yours ever stop that day? Did it stay fired off?
No, I kept mine running. And
Leonard Wood told me that David had the presence of mind as that wreck was unfolding to push in the clutch, keep the engine running. That's pretty cool. Don't call him Silver Fox for nothing.
While he was spinning around, he calls in and says he hit me.
How about from you, Harry? A fantastic finish.
The only one I had, I reckon, was down at Daytona, and I believe Dave was running, and Bobby won the race that day, and Kenny Schrader was in your car with him, Jenny.
And he turned
Yeah.
over.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm trying to get over here on the outside of Dave like it was coming down for a checkered flag, and all of a sudden, he disappeared.
Yeah.
And here he comes flying back through there. Dave backs off real fast, and I just didn't even see that car, and here he was. All I could see is tailpipes, transmission, and I was going to bend over, and the seat belts wouldn't let you. I figured I'm going to get the whole top take off this thing, hit right on my hood, roll right down the start-finish line. I've never, ever got over that, man.
Never going to be your best finish.
Ever.
Me and Donnie and Cale and I believe it was Beaty, we had a pretty exciting finish in '77 at Talladega.
Talladega, you bet.
Yeah, that was fun. I know I was leading the race. Buddy
That
Parrott.
was one of the fortunate ones, though, Darrell, that everybody made it back.
Yeah, it was. We at least did
I
that.
mean, and it could have very easily been all 4 of us about at the scoring stand instead of start-finish line.
I was leading the race on the last lap, and I'll never forget Buddy Parrott and David F. were my crew chiefs. And they were cussing me the whole last 5 or 10 laps of that race, telling me how stupid I was for being in front, because as David knows and Cale, in those days you did not want to be in the lead because you were a sitting duck. And so we come around, and these guys are raising Cain with me. Get back, like you can hold your hand up and say, I'd like to be third now, I'm going to be in third spot for a while. So anyway, and I finally, I just turned the radio off. I told them, y'all leave me alone, shut up, I know what I'm doing. I turned the radio off. So we go into the first turn. That's when you run high all the time. And we went into the first turn, and we started in that turn, and I just dropped it to the very bottom. And I don't know what happened behind me, if they thought I'd blown up or what happened, but I come off a corner, two back there, down on the inside of the racetrack, and I had a huge lead. Well, that's one of those rock rolls, because a huge lead on the back straightaway all by yourself is the worst thing that can happen to you. But anyway, here they come, three of them, boogity, 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 and just as they get there, I pull up, and I believe Cale was running second, and I just barely brushed into him. Didn't wreck him, just brushed him. And he wobbled a little bit, and I took on off, and I won the race, and that was exciting.
He didn't wobble near as bad there as he did coming off 4.
You got together some more there, didn't you?
Yeah, thanks to a guy leading. He decided what lane he wanted to be in.
Well, that was what you had to do.
He decided, I was told you weren't supposed to do that stuff.
Well, I was told that too, but I knew if everybody wouldn't do that, and I did, I'd probably win.
Here's Benny and Cale and I. Of course, Benny, he was wanting out. And Cale and I both were trying to get Darrell for the start-finish line, and I'm looking at the number on the side of his car, out my windshield. And I said, no, Cale, we're going that way. Please.
Just a little bit loose.
No,
a little bit sideways.
Yeah. But I said, no, Cale, we got to go that way.
And then Darlington in '79 was pretty exciting too. Me and Richard and you at the end there, passing each other 4 or 5 times.
Well, one of the finishes that counted the most to really grow the sport, everybody talks about '79, but it was Cale at Daytona with that in-car camera when he pulled that Babe Ruth stunt and described before he did it what he was going to do, and then brought it home. That was a moment, and I think it changed a lot of people's opinion about the racing, because they really saw it. They saw you guys dancing around at over 200 miles an hour, and they really got a sense that you were tightrope walkers going that fast. And
we didn't have restrictor plates in either, and you could do those. You could get that slingshot and that momentum, but now you're just
that's the point I was trying to make. Even like now with the restrictor plate, if a guy is like Darrell said, a couple 100 yards ahead or something like that, the pack's going to catch him, but it's not going to catch him outrunning him so bad. Now, back when we were unrestricted, if he was there 200 yards ahead, when I went by him, his gas cap usually came with me. That's how fast he passed.
Right.
To give you an example, we took an old Squier Monte Carlo at Talladega, Mr. Waltrip and myself. This car was not supposed to outrun anything. We qualified something like 23rd and 24th, or 24th and 25th, and we got hooked together. And this guy behind me, Cale, was leading the race in Junior's car, and we passed him so fast that we turned the 11 around backwards. The only way you can tell it was 11, it had the little dots going the other direction. Is that not right?
Oh, in Monte Carlo.
And these boys tell half a story. They got hooked up with me with Bud Moore's Ford, and I watched the hood buckle on both of them.
That was setting the record straight. Redhead, how about you and Cuckoo? How about some of the good special finishes and your different types of racing? What comes to mind?
Well, the only one that really comes to mind to me is the finish I had at Daytona that we started with in '71 when I won the Permatex 300. It was kind of like Darrell was telling me earlier. So we built that engine out in the yard. We'd blow 2 engines actually, old 427s, and didn't have a spare. And we was out there in the sand in the pits because we didn't have any kind of garage, didn't even have a roof at the time, and had the motor up on the flywheel upside down and taking rod and pistons out of 2 different motors and one head off this side and put it together out there in the sand. And he said it'd probably never even crank up without the sand grit locking it up.
Smoked all day long.
And put that thing in the car and it smoked all day long. I had a flat tire. The 3rd lap was 2 laps down. The motor smoked, and I still come back and won the race. And that was probably the one I shouldn't have won the race, but I shouldn't even been able to start it, much less win the thing. So I've been trying like Darrell, for about 17 years to win it. I run 2nd and 3rd, but I've ran the first race at Daytona, and I've been going all the way to '71 before I finally won that race. So that was a big one for me.
About yourself, some good, strong
Of course, Sterling, he was about 16 years old, and cousins just had running crew. That's when NASCAR ruled us back just to breathe out there. He wasn't allowed all that air up. Went through inspection, they took the carburetor off. Of course, they put it back on, seal it. Sterling goes back over in the car, gets the old big breather out, hooked up the cow, tapes it up. Had the inspector on each side and Bill Gateway in front. Them boys kind of grinning. And we inspect. Y'all take that carburetor back off. Says, y'all doing something to us, y'all grinning. Untape it again. Take it out. Sterling sets it over in the truck car, and they take the carburetor back off and look at it. All right, put it back on. Get the breather back out, same breather, tapes it back to the cow. It's let the hood down, them boys kind of turn it back, grinning, you know. And in fact, they just, y'all cheating us somewhere. Sitting right there in front of the eyes.
I want to ask Glen Wood something. When Marvin Pants got burned in the race down there, and you put Tiny Lunn in the 500 car because he saved Marvin's life in the fire down there, was that one of the most gratifying 500s you ever won?
I've said that before, that of all the ones the one with Pearson and Richard spinning out was a great race, but this was an emotional and gratifying race because he did get in there and he got down a few times, and we kind of went from 36 laps. The first caution was at 36 laps, and we had decided after that we could go 40. So we went the next one at 40, and it looked like, well, we can go 42. So the next two we run 42 laps. Well, we only had 40 to go at the finish, and there wasn't no more cautions. And Lorenzen came down pit road about 10 laps to go, and out of gas, and he spun his wheels all the way around to the back stretch with, the open gears at that time. Well, about 5 to go, here come Ned. He was next, and then it come to us. Well, when they gonna stop? Well, we knew we didn't have to. And the grandstand just they kept building it up till it almost got us to where we didn't know whether he could go or not. But as it turned out, that's the most gratifying race I guess we ever won.
What's it like, you guys, folks know that you haven't had the dollars that a lot of people have. Richard, when you were racing, you got a lot of help from guys like, did you used to take engines? Is it true you used to take engines over to Junior's place to be dynoed and stuff like that?
Well, I've had a lot of guys help me, over the years, and many, many years ago, one time, we just weren't running good, and we didn't know how good our engines were. So I said to Junior one day, I said, Junior, can I bring the engine over there and dyno it? And he said, yeah, bring her on over. So I got everything ready and take that engine over to Junior's, and I got over there. Junior got his guys, and he said, put that engine on a dyno for Dave and get that thing warmed up, pull the power on it and see how it is. So Junior was out in the back there, I think, plowing his garden. Had the old mule down there, was plowing the garden. Those guys warmed the engine up and run it, made a couple power runs, and pretty soon Junior comes walking back in there. He said, that thing don't run too good, does it? I said, no, I don't guess so. He says, you know how I can tell? I said, no. He said, them cows out there behind the dyno room, he said, they didn't even pick their heads up. He said, remember that, Junior?
I guess one with Junior, him and Ralph Seagraves came down to my little shop one time on Gumtree Road, and one evening I was putting the engine together in there, and Junior got to look at them parts that I was putting that thing together with, and he told Ralph, he said, Ralph, bring that boy up here. I'm going to give him some pieces to run. He said, them things ain't going to make it a whole race. And that's back when I started going up there. And Junior gave me a lot of stuff to run, a lot of old stuff. And used to use their tires. And I got Tim Brewer, I believe, was my crew chief back in. And might not have been, might have went to Cale, but we was at Pocono. And you had to have scuffed tires. Well, I done had an engine problem. I was just running around. And they said, we need some tires scuffed. Can we get you a scuffed set of tires? This is in the race. I said, yeah. Come in there, put on a set of stickers, went out there and run about 4 laps, come back in. They carried them down there and give them to Junior. Next week, my crew come in, all of them had scuffing tires for Junior on their T-shirt. Remember that? So, yeah, we always tried to help each other.
First time I went to juniors, I'd never been up there. I'd come from Tennessee driving up 40, and so I didn't exactly know where I was going. And Stevie was with me, and she said, well, how are we going to know where it is? I said, oh, it'd be easy to find. They got chicken houses.
A lot of
Everybody in Wilkes County got chicken houses.
It gets back to that business about, was it more fun then? Was it more fun then than now?
Yeah, I think it is. You know, back in, you know, we could all do things together or you know, do a little more socializing. And today, I think just the corporate side of Winston Cup racing today is just taking a lot of the fun out of it. Yeah, there's still a lot of fun in it, but it's not the same kind of fun we had back in the 70s and early 80s. You know, it just it's not there today. Not as my view. And Darrell can tell you.
Then you were on your own. I mean, you can call it cheating or whatever you want to call it, but you had the initiative to be creative. You had the initiative to build a better mousetrap because that meant you had an advantage. And nobody was there to take it away from you. You shared it with your friends or the other competitors caught up with you sooner or later.
Right.
But you were always trying to find that edge. And today you don't have that freedom. Today you show up to a racetrack, you're a nervous wreck when you get there with a car that you know is perfectly legal. You're not sure what they may do to it this week. They have templates, they have all these inspections, and it drives the owners and the mechanics crazy because you can't have any fun coming to the racetrack with something different, something better than everybody else has.
Red.
You know, you talk about the inspections and all this thing. I'd like to give a little story about my first Winston Cup race. I was living down in Miami. I started racing in '48. I've been running for a few years on the short tracks at Hollywood Speedway, West Palm Beach, and Hialeah. And one day, a guy named Sykes called me up in 1952 and said he just got a Hudson on a trade-in on the car lot. I wanted to know if I wanted that Hudson to take to Daytona. Of course, Daytona at that time, back '52, was still big to me since I've been running quarter miles all this time. So we went and took this old Hudson. It was a 4-door sedan, had a straight 8 in it with aluminum head and an automatic transmission. Of course, we didn't know nothing about race cars, these Hudson Hornets. We knew it was a Hudson, that's all we knew. Put a roll cage in the car. I didn't even have a trailer. We always towed our cars with a little tow bar hooked to the back bumper with a little 46 Ford. So we decided we couldn't pull that big Hudson with that little Ford, so we decided we're just going to drive it to Daytona. So Wayne Cackley, my mechanic, myself, put our luggage in the trunk, a little toolbox back there and a jack, and we took off one evening heading for Daytona Beach, driving this Hudson. It had it all lettered up and all numbered on the sides of it and everything else. We started up old 27 heading towards Daytona. So up there about 10 o'clock at night, I decided I wanted to see how it would run because we didn't really know how to run. So I was going to step on it. We was on that straightaway going up through that way, no traffic up there, and I got that thing up running about 80, 90 miles an hour down the road. And all of a sudden we come to, didn't know, but there's a 90-degree turn in the road in an apple orchard. Well, I was going way too fast to make that corner and I knew it. So we just held our breath, and as I went off of that 90-degree turn, there's an old dirt road went right down through the orange grove. I must have gone down there 2 blocks before I got the thing stopped. And we turned around and come back to the road again. I said, well, we know how to run fast enough without that, so we didn't run no more. We got up to Daytona in the middle of the night, asked somebody where the racetrack was at. The guy at the gas station told us. We went down to the beach, found the racetrack through the north turn, went around that north turn and pulled out there. I said, well, we'll get a few hours sleep on the beach. So we pulled up. And that time, everything was stock. We had the upholstery in the car. You had radios in the car. If you had a clock in the car, it still had to be in the car. The windows had to roll up. Everything had to be stock back in those days. And this was strictly stock with a roll cage in it. So we fell asleep over there on the beach. And about daylight, I was laying in the back seat, my mechanic in the front. My arm fell off the seat, and all of a sudden water was up to my wrists, up to my watch. The tide had come in, and I didn't realize that tide had come in that far. We thought we were going that way. The tide had come in and something swapped that car, and we was about 6 inches under water with my hand down in the water, all in the floorboards full of water and everything like that. I said, man, it was delicious. So we had to wait. The tide went out about 3 hours later. We got it cranked up and got out of there. And at the time, another thing went along with it. I had a buddy had a 46 Ford. And he was proud of this thing. He had Offenhauser heads, 3 2-barrels on that thing, all fenced up fancy, and he thought that was the fastest car there ever was. And he wanted to run this Hudson I had. So he kept pestering me to do that. So one afternoon after the practice, we went down there below the turn on the South Beach where it went down that way and started side by side racing each other. We was going down that beach. I mean, that Hudson was going, I don't know, I was running about 80, 90 mile an hour, and he was side by side. We come to a little puddle where the tide had gone out, and we just going through the puddle and going around. We come to this other big old puddle, and I started around one side, and he started through it, and the last thing I saw was that thing sinking. Going out of sight. We got down there and turned around and come back, and he had about 6 inches of that roof of that thing, and he was sitting up on the roof of that car where he went through a culvert, and the water was about 5 foot deep, and he sunk that car right down. He thought it was just a little puddle in the sand, and he was sitting up on the roof waving at us. We come back, and I just rolled out of the car almost on the sand, just dying, laughing at him, that car.
Red, do you remember in those days where we used to sign in with Bruner Sr.?
Well, I know I had to go up and get my NASCAR license at, we went up there one time, and I think they was in the business of trying to get a building, and they had an old two-story frame house over on the bay, and walked up the sidewalk, and Mary Bruno was sitting in a table in the living room, and Bill Francis' office was upstairs in the bedroom. Right. That was at NASCAR headquarters. So it's, and one year in the modified, I'm not sure, maybe Junior or somebody else could tell me here, but I remember one year when the Sportsman modified races down there to get inspection, they lined up about 20 of us behind the truck, and we went up the beach about 5 miles, turned over on the old South Atlantic Highway, went into the Neptune Drive-In Theater, went up to the popcorn stand, and NASCAR officials come out of the popcorn stand and checked the car. We drove by through the exit. So,
that was
it. NASCAR's come a long way.
Come a long way, man.
Yeah, now it costs you $900 to get it inspected.
That's right. Break at this point.
I think so.
No, positive.
That thing, see the wings in the middle of that, too.
I talked to a guy in Richmond about this thing.
Did you?
He's talking about getting a...
If we can get your name on a contract, it sure will help.
You wouldn't want my name on it.
Oh, yeah.
We
no.
Let's do a money.
$1,800,000.
You don't care where you get the money from, as long as you just get
One
it,
engine.
right?
Yeah.
How many people? 6?
It's got a pilot and 5. It's got club seating, and on the left side it's got a table between the seats. On the right side it's just close together, and then you know where you come in the door on the left side, and on the right side there's got a luggage and all that.
You remember that time we went to Savannah in your plane, we got in that real bad thunderstorm, we was going, remember lightning was cracking, y'all had that promoter from Myrtle Beach, and I remembered him back when he was a scoundrel, and he'd been born again, and I didn't know it. He was a Christian, and we was flying down through there, you know, and boy, lightning was popping all over the wings, you know, and I thought this guy was just like he used to be. Y'all all know him. It might have been Nick Lucas or whatever his name was. I don't remember what his name was, but he'd been born again, and he was truly a real Christian, and we was flying down through that lightning was popping all over the plane. I was really worried, man, and he said something to the effect about, you know, the good Lord looking out for us or something, and I looked over at him and I said, hey, I ain't worried about the rest of it, your ass, I'm concerned about him getting you. And I didn't know this guy had already converted and was a real Christian, you know, he gave me the hardest look, and I thought, why he's looking at me like that? Bobby just kept flying, you know. Yeah, we had to go down and go across Charleston and get down under the deal and go to Savannah. We'd come out of Darlington. We was going to Savannah, run a little race down there, and like got in a terrible
I did do a little of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was praying for you, and you were bad-mouthing him.
Yeah, I was bad-mouthing. I told him I thought he was going to get us trying to get him, you know.
Tell me.
I wasn't
worried about you. You was worried about him getting him and you going with him.
Because I know, man, he had to pay a bunch of dues. You know, he done me out of enough. What a trip. Look, and tell some stories.
Yeah.
But I remember that plane was full, too, because we had to go somewhere else and pick the rest of the people up and take off.
I never went anywhere that it wasn't full.
Yeah, you'd come out of the little airport up there and went to Florence and picked everybody up. The plane was full.
Yeah,
a whole bunch of us.
How could you do that and not charge anybody anything? Just friend.
Yeah, it was what ought to be done. You know, I had to have poor old Bill France.
trying to help him get on his feet.
You did a good job. I gotta give it
Did I
to
do
you.
okay?
You did okay.
They seem to be doing all right lately.
He's responsible for it. He
Challenge
did.
to get something going pretty good today, don't it?
Man, I'm telling you, and that's something. And I guess Brian took delivery of his Lear 60.
Lear 60 and 55. A couple of months. Yeah, it was surprising when he went to the Lear.
Yeah, and they didn't go to A Lear either.
I'm gonna sit on the back row so they won't see me.
They
what?
He thinks he don't need it. That's why he's telling us. He thinks he's so tough he don't even need it, man. Go on in there, your turn.
Oh, look at that thing.
No, I'm not going out with
He
you.
thought I was winking at him. Would you ever wink at somebody like that?
Lord, I gotta leave. I can't stand it.
Go on, we'll be here when you get back. Believe me.
A few weeks after taping these videos, Dick Beaty passed away. We dedicate these videos to his memory.